In late 1944, the German military, despite its losses, still held one thing: arrogance. They had reason to be proud. They had invented the modern paratrooper, not the Soviets with their early experiments, not the Italians with their tentative trials, the Germans. They had created the Fallschirmjäger, the hunters from the sky. These were the men who had changed warfare forever. On May 10, 1940, just 78 German paratroopers had captured Fort Eben-Emael in Belgium, supposedly the strongest fortress in the world, defended by 1,200 Belgian troops. They took it in hours. Using gliders to land silently on the fortress roof, they dropped shaped charges through the gun cupolas, paralyzing the Belgian defenses before they knew what hit them. These were the Green Devils of Crete. In May 1941, 22,000 Fallschirmjäger had done the impossible, captured an entire island from the air. Yes, they had suffered terrible losses, 6,000 casualties, but they had won. They had jumped into a hurricane of British, Australian, and New Zealand fire, and they had conquered. These were the Lions of Monte Cassino. In early 1944, just 300 German paratroopers had held that ruined monastery against the combined might of the Allied armies. For 4 months, the Allies dropped 1,400 tons of bombs on them. The Germans moved into the rubble and made it their fortress. When the New Zealanders attacked on February the 17th, the British lost 50% casualties in a single company. When the Allies finally took Monte Cassino in May, they had suffered 55,000 casualties. The German Fallschirmjäger, perhaps 20,000. These men were the elite, hardened by 4 years of the most brutal war humanity had ever seen. They had jumped into Norway's frozen mountains. They had held the line in Russia's frozen hell. They had been forged in the furnace of total war. They were the masters of airborne warfare. And then there was the American paratrooper. In the German view, they were a joke. Where the Fallschirmjäger had been born in 1936, given 8 years to perfect their craft before war came, the American Airborne had been thrown together in 1940, rushed, improvised. Their first combat battalion wasn't even activated until October 1941, just 2 months before Pearl Harbor. The German generals had seen Americans fight, or rather, fail to fight, at Kasserine Pass in Tunisia, February 1943. Rommel's Afrika Korps had smashed into the green American Second Corps like a hammer through glass. In just 10 days, the Americans lost 183 tanks, 7,000 men, with 3,000 captured or missing. They had run, panicked, abandoned their equipment. German officers reported that American soldiers didn't know how to dig foxholes properly. They marked their own minefields with little flags, so helpful for the Germans to see exactly where not to step. Their tanks were thin-skinned death traps. Their officers commanded from bunkers 70 miles behind the lines. Rommel himself had written, "The Americans are soft. They are commercial soldiers, playing at war. When hit hard, they will break." And the American Airborne? Their first major combat jump, D-Day, June 6, 1944, had been a catastrophe of planning. Of the 13,100 American paratroopers who jumped into Normandy, most never landed anywhere near their drop zones. The 101st Airborne was scattered across 25 miles of French countryside. Some sticks landed 35 miles from their objectives. The pilots, many on their first combat mission, had panicked when they hit the fog bank over the Cotentin Peninsula. When the flak started, they climbed, dove, jinked left and right. Green lights went on too early, too late, or not at all. Paratroopers jumped into flooded fields and drowned, weighed down by 70 pounds of equipment. They jumped into German-occupied villages and were shot before they hit the ground. The Pathfinders, the elite troops supposed to mark the drop zones, had mostly landed in the wrong places themselves. The commander of the 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment landed in a tree. The assistant division commander broke his ankle on landing. After 24 hours, the 101st could only account for 2,500 of its 6,000 men. Yes, somehow, through individual courage and pure chaos that confused the Germans as much as the Americans, they had achieved their D-Day objectives. But it hadn't been the crisp, professional operation of German paratroopers at Eben-Emael. It had been a mess. Brave chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Then came Operation Market Garden. September 1944. Montgomery's daring plan to end the war by Christmas. It would be the largest airborne operation in history. 35,000 Allied paratroopers, including the 101st, would seize 9 bridges through the Netherlands, creating a carpet for British armor to roll into Germany's industrial heartland. The 101st's part seemed simple enough. They would capture 4 bridges near Eindhoven and hold them for, what, a day? 2 at most? Until the British Third Corps arrived. And they did capture their bridges. Mostly. The bridge at Sonne was blown up in their faces. Paratroopers were literally running onto it when the Germans detonated the charges. But they took Eindhoven. They held their ground. But Market Garden was a disaster. A bridge too far, they would later call it. The British 1st Airborne at Arnhem, the crucial final bridge, landed 8 miles from their objective. Only 1 battalion of 600 men actually reached the bridge. They held it for 4 days against 2 SS Panzer divisions that weren't supposed to be there. Of the 10,000 British paratroopers who jumped at Arnhem, only 2,000 escaped. The rest were killed or captured. The 101st held their section of Hell's Highway for weeks as German forces attacked from both sides, trying to cut the narrow corridor. But it didn't matter. The operation had failed. The war would not be over by Christmas. So in December 1944, as the German High Command studied their maps in the Wolf's Lair, they looked at the 101st Airborne, resting and refitting in Mourmelon, France, and saw exactly what they expected, a weak, overhyped unit that had failed in its last 2 missions. They had been scattered and disorganized on D-Day. They had been part of Montgomery's failed gamble at Market Garden. They were tired, under strength. 40% of their men were new replacements who had never seen combat. They had no winter equipment. They were in a rest camp, drinking warm beer and chasing French girls. In the German professional military assessment, the 101st Airborne was not a threat. The Germans were about to laugh. December 16th, 1944. 5:30 a.m. The Ardennes Forest. The Americans called it the Ghost Front. 85 miles of dense forest, deep ravines, and narrow roads along the Belgian-Luxembourg-German border. It was the quietest sector in all of Europe, a place where both sides sent exhausted divisions to rest and green divisions to get their first taste of the front lines. The Allied intelligence officers were confident. The Germans were finished. They had lost France. They had lost most of their air force. They were fighting on two fronts. The Soviets were preparing their winter offensive in the east. The only question was whether the war would end in weeks or months. Besides, the Ardennes was impossible terrain for an offensive. Hadn't the French thought the same thing in 1940? No matter. The Germans didn't have the fuel for a major offensive. They didn't have the men. Ultra intercepts, the Allied ability to read German codes, showed nothing unusual. A few units moving here and there. Normal winter adjustments. But Hitler had one last card to play. For 3 months, in absolute secrecy, he had assembled a ghost army. 3 armies, 300,000 men, 1,000 tanks, including the massive 70-ton King Tigers, 2,000 artillery pieces, all hidden in the forests of the Eifel Mountains, moving only at night, maintaining complete radio silence. The plan was called Wacht am Rhein, Watch on the Rhine, a deliberately defensive-sounding name to fool Allied intelligence. The objective was audacious: punch through the American lines in the Ardennes, race 125 miles to Antwerp, split the British and American armies, and force the West to negotiate peace. Then Germany could turn all its strength against the Soviets. It was madness. Hitler's generals knew it. Field Marshal von Rundstedt called it "this damned thing." Model argued it was impossible, but Hitler insisted, and he had chosen his moment perfectly. The weather forecast promised what the Germans needed: fog, snow, low clouds. The Allied air forces, the devastating fighter bombers that had destroyed German armor in Normandy, would be grounded and facing the German assault. 4 American divisions holding those 85 miles. The 106th Infantry Division in combat for exactly 5 days. The 28th Infantry Division mauled in the Hürtgen forest down to 50% strength. The 4th Infantry Division, also bloodied in the Hürtgen. The 99th Infantry Division in the line for only a month. At 5:30 a.m. on December 16th, the Ghost Front exploded. 2,000 German guns opened fire simultaneously. The barrage lasted 90 minutes. American forward positions simply ceased to exist. Trees shattered into lethal splinters. The ground shook like an earthquake. Men in foxholes were buried alive. Then, out of the swirling snow and fog, came the Germans. The 106th Infantry Division, those boys who had been in combat for 5 days, took the full weight of the 5th Panzer Army. By noon, 2 entire regiments were surrounded. The division commander, General Alan Jones, his son was in one of the surrounded regiments, was on the phone to Corps headquarters. "I need ammunition. I need reinforcements." The response, "Hold at all costs." By December the 17th, those 2 regiments, 8,000 men, had surrendered, the largest mass surrender of American forces in Europe. The German spearheads were racing west. Kampfgruppe Piper, a battle group of SS Panthers and Tigers, had broken through and was driving for the Meuse bridges. Behind them, the roads were littered with destroyed American vehicles and equipment, entire supply dumps, millions of gallons of fuel, mountains of ammunition, fell into German hands intact. The word spreading through American rear areas was, "The Germans have broken through." Paratroopers are landing everywhere. Tiger tanks are 20 miles behind our lines. Some of it was true. Some was panic. But the front line did not bend. It shattered. By December the 17th, Eisenhower was facing the greatest crisis of his command. The Germans had created a bulge in the Allied line, 30 miles wide and growing. If they reached the Meuse, if they took the bridges, if they got to Antwerp. Eisenhower called an emergency conference at Verdun. The mood was grim. Then he looked around the table and said, "The present situation is to be regarded as one of opportunity for us and not of disaster." General Patton laughed. "Hell, let's have the guts to let the bastards go all the way to Paris. Then we'll really cut 'em off and chew 'em up." But Eisenhower needed something done now. The key was Bastogne, a small Belgian market town of 4,000 people. 7 roads converged there like spokes on a wheel. Every road the Germans needed to sustain their advance to Antwerp went through Bastogne. If the Germans took it quickly, their offensive might succeed. If it held, Eisenhower turned to his only reserves, the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions. They were in camps near Homs, France, over 100 miles away. He needed them at Bastogne yesterday, December 17th, 1944, 8:30 p.m., Camp Mourmelon, France. The men of the 101st Airborne were watching a movie, Marlene Dietrich in 7 Sinners. They had been in rest camp for 3 weeks after 72 days in Holland. They were finally warm, clean, federal. Some were drunk. Many were in Reims on pass, doing what soldiers do in rear areas. Suddenly, the lights came on. An officer strode to the front. "All passes are cancelled. Report to your units immediately." Chaos. Officers running between barracks. "Get your men ready to move." "Where are we going?" "I don't know. Just get them ready." The 101st was not ready for combat. After the bloodletting in Holland, the division was at perhaps 60% strength. 40% were replacements, kids fresh from the States who had never heard a shot fired in anger. They had no winter clothing. The supply officers had been told they wouldn't need it until spring. Many men were missing basic equipment, rifles, ammunition, even boots. They had been in rest camp. General Maxwell Taylor, the division commander, was in Washington, D.C. General Gerald Higgins, the assistant commander, had been in England and just returned that afternoon. The division would be led by the artillery commander, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, a short, quiet, thoroughly professional officer the men called Old Croc. Through the freezing night, men scrambled to find equipment. Cooks, clerks, anybody who could walk was given a rifle. The division scrounged every truck they could find. Cattle trucks from the Red Ball Express, deuce and a halfs, even French civilian trucks. Private Donald Burgett of the 506th remembered, "We were told to take all the ammunition we could carry. I had bandoliers draped around my neck, grenades in every pocket. We looked like Mexican bandits. They didn't know where they were going. The officers didn't know. Even McAuliffe only knew. There's been a breakthrough. We're going to Belgium." December 18th. Through the night and into the day, the convoy of 380 trucks rolled north. It was a scene from Dante's vision of hell. The temperature was below freezing. The trucks had no canvas covers. Men huddled together for warmth, their breath forming ice on their faces. Some sang to keep their spirits up. Most just endured, hour after hour, frozen and miserable. But the worst part was what they saw on the road. Coming the opposite direction was the American army in retreat. A panicked flood of vehicles, troops, refugees, staff cars racing south, trucks loaded with officers' baggage, rear echelon troops who had thrown away their weapons. "Hey, Airborne!" someone shouted from a retreating truck. "You're going the wrong way. The Krauts are coming." A paratrooper shouted back, "We're airborne, you son of a bitch!" We don't know how to retreat. But it was sobering. These weren't just support troops running. There were infantry, combat infantry, shuffling south with that 1,000-yard stare of the defeated. The convoy rolled through the night, 107 miles. Men vomited from motion sickness or nerves into their helmets. When the truck stopped, they had to pry men's frozen hands from the railings. As they got closer to Bastogne, the evidence of disaster multiplied. Destroyed American vehicles, dead GIs by the roadside, burning supply dumps, and always the flood of retreating Americans. One officer from the 28th Infantry Division, the unit that had been holding the line, stopped McAuliffe's jeep. "General, there's nothing left. My division is destroyed. You can't stop them with what you've got." McAuliffe just nodded and waved his driver forward. Bastogne. December 19th, 4 a.m. In peacetime, it was a pleasant market town where farmers brought their cattle and produce. The Church of Saint-Pierre dominated the central square. Narrow medieval streets radiated outward. The surrounding countryside was typical Ardennes, rolling hills, patches of forest, small villages. But Bastogne sat on a plateau, 1,463 feet high. And more importantly, it was where 7 major roads met. Roads that led north to Liège, northwest to Namur and the Meuse crossings, west to Dinant, southwest to Sedan, south to Arlon, southeast to Luxembourg, east to the German border. For the German panzers to maintain their advance, they needed those roads. Tanks couldn't move through the Ardennes forests. They were confined to the roads, and all the roads came through Bastogne. It was, as one officer put it, the hole in the donut. The first elements of the 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment arrived just as the last American stragglers were leaving. Team Cherry of the 10th Armored Division, a few tanks and armored infantry, had been fighting a delaying action east of town. They were down to their last ammunition. Colonel Julian Ewell, commanding the 501st, didn't wait for orders. He pushed his men straight through town and deployed them east along the Longueville Road, just in time. Within hours, they were in contact with German reconnaissance units. Throughout December the 19th, the rest of the 101st arrived, and McAuliffe deployed them in a rough circle around Bastogne. The 501st to the east, the 506th to the northeast at Noville, the 502nd to the northwest, the 327th Glider Infantry to the west and south. It wasn't much. Maybe 11,000 paratroopers, Team Cherry's survivors, perhaps 40 tanks still running, some scattered artillery. The 463rd Parachute Field Artillery Battalion had made it with their 75mm pack howitzers. Remnants of other units who hadn't run. Combat Command B of the 10th Armored, some tank destroyers from the 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion. By December the 20th, they could hear German armor moving through the darkness on all sides. By December 21st, the last road was cut. The 101st Airborne was surrounded. The mathematics of the siege were simple and impossible. Inside the Bastogne perimeter, 18,000 Americans. That included everyone: paratroopers, tankers, cooks, clerks, even some Army Air Force personnel who had been caught in the town. Of these, perhaps 11,000 were combat-effective infantry. Outside, surrounding them, 5 German divisions. The 2nd Panzer Division, one of the Wehrmacht's elite formations, veterans of Poland, France, and Russia. Panzer Lehr, perhaps the elite tank division, formed from the instructor cadre of Germany's armor schools. The 26th Volksgrenadier Division, tough, experienced infantry, plus elements of the 5th Parachute Division. Yes, German paratroopers, the inheritors of the Fallschirmjäger tradition. In total, 50,000 Germans, with tanks, Panthers, Mark IVs, assault guns, with artillery, including 88mm guns that could destroy any American tank at 1,000 yards. The Americans had, what, 40 tanks, many already damaged. No tank in Bastogne could face a Panther head-on and survive. They had artillery, but limited ammunition, maybe 10 rounds per gun per day if they were careful. They had small arms and courage. That was it. But the real enemy wasn't the Germans. It was the weather and logistics. The temperature plummeted to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, then 0, then below. This was the coldest winter Belgium had seen in 40 years. The ground froze so hard that men broke entrenching tools trying to dig foxholes. They used explosive charges to blast holes in the frozen earth. The 101st had no winter equipment, none. Men wrapped their feet in burlap bags. They stuffed newspaper in their boots. They cut up blankets to make improvised snow capes. Frostbite was epidemic. Men's feet turned black. Medics had no choice but to amputate toes, feet, sometimes entire legs. Medical supplies ran out almost immediately. The aid stations had calculated for a 3-day action with moderate casualties. By the second day, they were out of plasma. Morphine was rationed, saved only for stomach wounds and amputations. Men with minor wounds, missing fingers, shrapnel in arms and legs, got aspirin if they were lucky. Food, C rations and K rations for maybe 4 days, then nothing. Men scraped frozen food from dead Germans. They found potatoes in Belgian cellars. They ate snow. Ammunition was critically short. Machine gunners were told, short bursts only. Make every bullet count. Mortar crews were limited to 2 rounds per day unless under direct attack. Artillery was saved for only the most desperate moments. And above all, no air support. The weather had closed in like a gray shroud, fog, snow, and low clouds. The Allied air forces, which had dominated the skies since D-Day, were grounded. No fighter bombers to break up German attacks, no transports to drop supplies. The 101st was alone. The German attacks began almost immediately. Not one massive assault, but probing attacks. Testing, feeling for weakness. At Neuville, northeast of Bastogne, Team de Sobre, a task force from the 10th Armored, and the 1st Battalion of the 506th Parachute Infantry faced the full weight of the 2nd Panzer Division. December 19th, dawn. German tanks and infantry emerged from the fog. The Americans had positioned their tanks hull down behind a ridge. They waited until the Germans were 500 yards away, then opened fire. The lead German tank exploded, then another, but more kept coming. By noon, Neuville was burning. Every building was on fire. Wounded men were being pulled from blazing houses. The aid station was hit by an 88mm shell. Wounded men were killed where they lay. Major William de Sobre was hit in the face by shrapnel, blinded in one eye. But Team de Sobre held. For 2 days they held. When ordered to withdraw on December the 20th, they had destroyed 30 German tanks. But of their original 15 Shermans, only 4 made it back to Bastogne. To the east, at the village of Marvi, Team O'Hara and the 327th Glider Infantry stopped Panzerlehr. German tanks rolled to within 100 yards of American positions before bazookas teams knocked them out at point-blank range. But the worst was in the Bois Jacques, Jack's Woods, to the northwest. This was where Easy Company, 2nd Battalion, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment would earn its place in history. They held a line in the frozen forest, each foxhole barely within shouting distance of the next. The trees provided no real cover. German 88mm shells, set to burst in the treetops, sent lethal wood splinters in every direction. Private Donald Malarkey remembered, "The shelling was constant. You couldn't leave your hole. You defecated in your hole. You ate in your hole. You froze in your hole." The men developed a bitter humor when German loudspeakers broadcast propaganda, "Give up, American soldiers. You are surrounded. Enjoy hot food and warm beds." The paratrooper shouted back, "Nuts!" One soldier, delirious with cold, stood up during a barrage and announced he was going to Paris. He walked 10 feet before shrapnel cut him down. The line was so thinly held that both German and American patrols passed through it at night. Men shot at sounds, shadows, anything that moved. Sometimes they were shooting at each other, sometimes at nothing. The night belonged to fear. On December the 21st, the Germans launched a major attack from the northwest, infantry supported by tanks. The American line bent, but didn't break. Cooks, clerks, even walking wounded were thrown into the line. A supply sergeant found himself commanding a machine gun. The division band was given rifles and sent to plug a gap, but they held. Somehow, impossibly, they held. On the German side, frustration was mounting. General Heinrich von Lüttwitz, commanding the 47th Panzer Corps, couldn't understand it. These were American paratroopers, not even regular infantry, lightly armed, surrounded, no hope of relief. They should have surrendered by now. The German Fallschirmjäger of the 5th Parachute Division were particularly puzzled. They knew what it meant to be surrounded, to fight against overwhelming odds. They had done it themselves at Monte Cassino, in Normandy, in Russia, but those had been German paratroopers fighting for the fatherland. These Americans, why were they fighting so hard? For what? For Belgium? For this insignificant town? A captured German officer later told his interrogators, "We knew exactly where you were. We knew how few you were. We knew you had no supplies, but every time we attacked, you fought like devils." The German timetable was ruined. The plan called for Bastogne to fall on December 18th, 2 days after the offensive began. It was now December 21st, and the Americans still held. Every hour the 101st held Bastogne was an hour of fuel burned, ammunition expended, casualties taken. Every hour was an hour for the Americans to rush reinforcements to the Meuse. General Hasso von Manteuffel, commanding the 5th Panzer Army, made a decision. He would bypass Bastogne, leave containing forces, and continue west. But this meant leaving a powerful American force in his rear, sitting on his supply lines. Still, there was one option remaining. Perhaps the Americans could be convinced to see reason. Perhaps they would accept an honorable surrender. December 22nd, 1940. 11:30 a.m. 4 Germans approached the American lines under a white flag. A major, a captain, and 2 enlisted men. They were met by men of F Company, 327th Glider Infantry, near the Arlon Road. "We want to speak to your commanding general," the German captain said in accented English. He was polite, formal, correct. The Germans were blindfolded and led through the lines to the command post in Bastogne. McAuliffe was asleep. He'd been up for 60 straight hours. His staff woke him. "The Germans want to talk to you, General." "Do they want to surrender?" McAuliffe asked hopefully. "No, sir. They want us to surrender." McAuliffe took the paper and read. "To the USA, Commander of the encircled town of Bastogne, the fortune of war is changing. This time the USA forces in and near Bastogne have been encircled by strong German armored units. More German armored units have crossed the river. Our near Ortheville have taken Marche and reached St. Hubert by passing through Hompre-Sibret-Tillé. Libramont is in German hands. There is only one possibility to save the encircled USA troops from total annihilation. That is the honorable surrender of the encircled town. In order to think it over, a term of 2 hours will be granted beginning with the presentation of this note. If this proposal should be rejected, 1 German artillery corps and 6 heavy AA battalions are ready to annihilate the USA troops in and near Bastogne. The order for firing will be given immediately after this 2 hours term. All the serious civilian losses caused by this artillery fire would not correspond with the well-known American humanity." The German commander McAuliffe read it again, then laughed. "Oh, nuts," he said, and tossed the paper on the table. McAuliffe's staff gathered around. The Germans were waiting for a formal reply. "What should I say?" McAuliffe asked. "That first remark of yours would be hard to beat, General," suggested Lieutenant Colonel Harry Kinnard, the operations officer. "What did I say?" "You said nuts." McAuliffe thought about it, then nodded. "Type it up." Colonel Joseph Harper, commander of the 327th, typed a formal response on a typewriter. December 22nd, 1944. To the German commander, nuts. The American commander Harper took the message back to the German officers. The German captain read it, confused. "What does this mean?" he asked. "It means go to hell," Harper said. Then, louder, "And I'll tell you something else. If you continue to attack, we'll kill every goddamn German that tries to break into this city." The German captain stiffened. "We shall kill many Americans. This is war." "On your way, bud," Harper said, ending the conversation. "And good luck to you." As the Germans were led away, blindfolded again, Harper heard one say to the other in German, "These Americans, they are verrückt." Crazy. The word of McAuliffe's reply spread through the perimeter within hours. From foxhole to foxhole, through the aid stations, to the artillery positions. The general told them, "Nuts!" It was like an electric current through frozen wire. Men who had been on the edge of despair laughed. If the old man could tell the entire German army to go to hell, then by God, they could hold out a little longer. That night, the German promise came true. Luftwaffe bombers appeared over Bastogne, the first German air raid the 101st had experienced. The bombing was followed by the most intensive artillery barrage yet. The center of Bastogne was pulverized. The aid station was hit again. Civilians huddled in cellars as their town was destroyed above them, but the 101st didn't break. They endured. And in their foxholes, in the frozen dark, they repeated their new battle cry, "Nuts!" December 23rd to 25th, Christmas, 1944. The Germans, enraged by the rejection of their surrender demand, unleashed everything they had. This was no longer about taking Bastogne for strategic reasons. This was about pride. German pride against American stubbornness. On Christmas Eve, the Luftwaffe returned. Then, At 3 a.m. on Christmas morning, the attack began. 18 German tanks, white-painted for snow camouflage, supported by Volksgrenadiers in winter whites, struck from the northwest. They broke through the first line. Tank destroyers firing from the ruins of houses knocked out the lead tanks, but more kept coming. At Champs, a village on the western perimeter, German tanks were driving straight for Bastogne when they ran into the most unlikely defense force imaginable. The 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion's reconnaissance company, jeeps and armored cars, plus the headquarters company of the 327th Glider Infantry, cooks, clerks, drivers. They held. Against tanks, in the dark, on Christmas morning, they held. At dawn, the attack from the south. Panzerlehr, with the 5th Parachute Division. They got within sight of Bastogne's church spires before American tank destroyers and the last reserves, walking wounded who had discharged themselves from aid stations, stopped them. The paratroopers were down to their last ammunition. Artillery was firing over open sights at point-blank range. One battalion reported, "No ammunition," preparing to fight with bayonets. Then, a miracle. December 23rd. For the first time in a week, the fog lifted. The sun, the impossible sun, broke through. McAuliffe was on the radio immediately. Request immediate airdrop. Ammunition, medical supplies, food, situation urgent. At 11:50 a.m., they heard them. Aircraft engines. Men scrambled from foxholes, looking up. There, C-47s. Beautiful, wonderful American transport planes. The first wave dropped parachutes with colored chutes. Red for ammunition, white for medical supplies, blue for food. Some drifted into German lines, but most landed within the perimeter. Men ran into the open under fire to retrieve the bundles, and behind the transports came the fighters. P-47 Thunderbolts. They dove on German positions with rockets and bombs. For the first time in a week, the Germans felt the weight of Allied air superiority. One paratrooper watched a P-47 destroy a German tank and yelled, "That's for the boys who didn't make it." The air drops continued. 241 planes on December the 23rd alone. More on the 24th, despite the German air attacks. Medicine for the wounded, ammunition for the guns, even a few Christmas dinners. Turkey and cranberry sauce dropped by parachute. The tide hadn't turned, but for the first time, the men of the 101st knew they could hold. December 26th, 1944, 4:50 p.m. From the south, the distinctive sound of American tank engines. Different from the German diesels. Then, through the haze, an M4 Sherman appeared. On its side, painted in white, Cobra King. It was the lead element of the 37th Tank Battalion, 4th Armored Division. Patton's boys. They had driven like madmen for 3 days, fighting through German roadblocks to open a corridor to Bastogne. The tank commander, First Lieutenant Charles Bogus, dismounted and approached the paratroopers' foxholes cautiously. Everybody was jumpy. "What outfit?" a paratrooper called. "4th Armored, Patton's 3rd Army. Where's your commanding officer?" The paratrooper grinned. "General McAuliffe's in town. Follow me." The siege was broken. But here's where the legend truly began. As more tanks of the 4th Armored rolled in, expecting to find grateful, exhausted paratroopers thankful for rescue, they instead found indignation. "Rescue," one sergeant of the 101st said. Hell, we didn't need rescuing. We were doing fine. Another paratrooper looked at the tank crew. What took you guys so long? We've been waiting for you to catch up. When a reporter asked McAuliffe about being rescued, he responded, "We resent any implication that we were rescued." We were never in serious trouble. The 101st's casualties told a different story. 341 killed, 1,691 wounded, 516 missing, nearly 25% of the division. The 10th Armored's Combat Command B had lost 500 men, but they had held. The German offensive was broken. It had shattered against the donut hole. The panzers had burned their precious fuel driving around Bastogne instead of through it. The infantry had bled itself white trying to take it. The timetable was destroyed. By January 3rd, the Allies had regained all the ground lost in the Battle of the Bulge. By January 25th, the battle was officially over. The Germans had suffered 100,000 casualties and lost 800 tanks. Irreplaceable losses. It was their last offensive of the war. But something more important had happened at Bastogne. Something beyond strategy and tactics. The German laughter had stopped. These weak American paratroopers, these amateurs who had been scattered on D-Day, who had failed at Market Garden, had stood against everything the Wehrmacht could throw at them. Outnumbered 5-1, without winter clothing, without supplies, without hope of relief. In the coldest winter in memory. And they had answered with one word: nuts! The German Fallschirmjäger, those masters of airborne warfare, the lions of Monte Cassino, had met their equals. No, their betters. Because the Americans hadn't held a fortified monastery. They had held frozen foxholes. They hadn't fought in the mountains of Italy with supply lines behind them. They had fought surrounded, cut off, alone. A German officer, captured after the battle, said it best: "We knew you were paratroopers. But we thought American paratroopers were different from ours. We thought you were showmen, Hollywood soldiers. We were wrong. You were harder than we were." The 101st Airborne had earned a new name, not from their commanders, not from the press, from themselves. In those frozen foxholes, during those desperate days, they were the Battered Bastards of Bastogne, and they had become a legend. Today in Bastogne, there is a monument. It's not a statue of a general or a grand memorial. It's a simple stone marker in the Bois Jacques, Jack's Woods, where Easy Company held the line. Visitors, many of them descendants of the men who fought there, leave small tokens, airborne wings, patches, photos. And every December, when the snow falls and the temperature drops, old men, fewer every year, gather in Bastogne. Belgian children, taught by their grandparents never to forget, throw flowers as the veterans pass. The church bells ring, the same bells that rang during the siege. Because Bastogne wasn't just about holding a town. It wasn't even about winning a battle. It was about the moment when American citizen soldiers, kids from Brooklyn and Texas, from California and Tennessee, proved they were the equal of any soldiers in the world. They were not the weak Americans the Germans had laughed at after Kasserine Pass. They were not the scattered, chaotic paratroopers of D-Day. They had become something harder, something tempered by combat and forged by determination. They had become the kind of soldiers who could look at impossible odds, at certain death, at an honorable surrender, and say, "Nuts!"